People say it so casually. Everything happens for a reason. We hear it after heartbreaks, failures, losses, and moments that leave us staring at the ceiling at night, wondering how life unraveled so fast. But if everything truly happens for a reason, then why does it hurt this much? Why do some prayers go unanswered while others seem to echo in silence? And why do the moments that shape us the most never arrive with explanations? The truth is, life never explains itself in real time. It only reveals meaning in reverse. When we're inside the storm, all we see is chaos. Broken plans. Closed doors. Conversations that ended too early. People who walked away without warning. Dreams that collapsed right when they felt closest. But what if the reason was never meant to make sense immediately? What if clarity isn't a gift given at the beginning, but a reward that arrives only after endurance? Psychologists say the human brain is wired to search for patterns. We need meaning the way lungs need oxygen. When something painful happens, the mind panics, not because of pain alone, but because of confusion. The unknown frightens us more than suffering itself. That's why silence after loss feels louder than the loss itself. That's why unanswered questions hurt more than harsh answers. And that's why the phrase "everything happens for a reason" feels comforting to some, and insulting to others. Here's something surprising. Studies show that people who later describe their lives as successful or fulfilled often trace their transformation back to moments they once labeled as disasters. The job rejection that forced them to pivot. The breakup that saved them from a smaller life. The failure that humbled them enough to grow. At the time, none of those moments felt meaningful. They felt cruel. Random. Unfair. Yet years later, those same moments became turning points. Not because they were good, but because they shaped something stronger. But meaning is not hidden inside events. Meaning is created by response. Two people can experience the same tragedy, and one becomes bitter while the other becomes wise. The event is identical. The outcome is not. This is where the phrase "everything happens for a reason" is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean everything that happens is good. It means everything that happens can be used. Pain doesn't arrive with purpose attached. Purpose is forged when pain meets reflection. Faith traditions echo this truth in different ways. Ancient wisdom never promised easy paths. It promised growth through fire. Gold is not refined by comfort. It's refined by heat. Seeds don't grow on the surface. They grow in darkness. And strength is never built during seasons of ease. It's built when endurance is the only option left. If everything always made sense, we would never stretch beyond who we already are. Think about the moments that changed you. Not the happy ones. The quiet ones. The nights you cried without telling anyone. The mornings you showed up even when your heart felt heavy. The times you were forced to let go of what you loved because holding on was costing you yourself. Those moments didn't feel like reasons. They felt like endings. Yet endings often disguise beginnings we aren't ready to recognize yet. Modern life makes this harder. We scroll endlessly, comparing highlight reels while living behind the scenes. We expect instant clarity in a world that only offers slow wisdom. We want answers now, but life prefers to teach through time. We ask why too early, then blame the universe when no answer comes. But some reasons require distance. Some meanings require maturity. Some truths only make sense once we become someone capable of understanding them. Here's the paradox. The same event that breaks one person can awaken another. The same loss that destroys hope in one heart can birth purpose in another. Not because fate is selective, but because growth is personal. Life doesn't happen to us as much as it responds to who we are becoming. The reason is not always in the event. Sometimes the reason is who you become because of it. And maybe that's the real message behind the phrase. Not that every pain is planned. Not that every loss was necessary. But that nothing is wasted. Not one tear. Not one sleepless night. Not one moment you thought you wouldn't survive. Even when life felt senseless, it was shaping depth. Even when answers were absent, resilience was forming. Even when you felt lost, direction was quietly being prepared. One day, you will look back and realize that what felt like a delay was protection. What felt like rejection was redirection. What felt like an ending was a quiet rescue. And you won't say everything happened for a reason because someone told you to believe it. You'll say it because you lived long enough to see the reason reveal itself. And until that day comes, maybe the most powerful thing you can do is keep walking. Keep trusting. Keep growing. Not because you understand the reason yet, but because one day, you will. But understanding rarely arrives in a single moment. It arrives in fragments. In quiet realizations that slip into your thoughts while driving alone. In memories that suddenly make sense years later. In conversations that trigger old emotions but new understanding. Life teaches slowly because instant wisdom would overwhelm us. If we saw the full picture too soon, we would lose the courage to walk through it. That's why the path only reveals itself one step at a time, just enough light for today, never the whole road. There is something deeply human about resisting uncertainty. We want guarantees before we commit. We want certainty before we surrender. But growth has never responded to control. Growth responds to trust. And trust is hardest to practice when evidence is missing. That's when the phrase "everything happens for a reason" becomes less of a statement and more of a challenge. Can you keep moving even when the reason is invisible? Can you keep believing when the evidence contradicts your hope? History quietly proves that some of the most meaningful outcomes are born from moments that initially appeared meaningless. Entire careers have begun from accidental meetings. Lifelong friendships have emerged from missed trains. Innovations have risen from failures that once felt humiliating. There are stories of people who lost everything only to discover a version of themselves they never knew existed. Not stronger because they wanted to be, but stronger because they had no other choice. What's uncomfortable is accepting that randomness and purpose often coexist. Some events are chaotic. Some losses are senseless. Some pain has no need explanation. And yet, within that randomness, humans have an extraordinary ability to create meaning. We stitch purpose into the wounds. We carve wisdom from regret. We turn survival into testimony. The reason is not always written by fate, sometimes it is written by resilience. Think about the moments when you were forced to slow down. Illness. Burnout. Emotional exhaustion. At the time, they felt like interruptions. Now, maybe you see them as warnings, or invitations to reevaluate, or chances to realign with what truly mattered. What if those pauses were not punishments but protections? What if life wasn't stopping you, but saving you? Loss is the hardest teacher. It takes without explaining why. It leaves absence where certainty once lived. Yet loss sharpens awareness. It strips away illusions. It reveals how fragile time really is. People who have lost deeply often love more intentionally afterward. They speak honestly. They stop postponing joy. Pain taught them what comfort never could. And though no one would choose that path, many emerge transformed by it. Modern culture encourages speed, success, and constant validation. But meaning grows in stillness. It forms when applause fades. When external approval disappears. When you're left alone with your choices and must decide who you are without an audience. Those quiet moments shape character more than any achievement ever will. And character is often the hidden reason behind the struggle. There's another uncomfortable truth we avoid acknowledging. Sometimes the reason something happened is simply to reveal what we were avoiding. The relationship that ended showed us our own patterns. The failure exposed gaps we refused to address. The disappointment forced us to confront expectations we never questioned. Pain doesn't just change circumstances, it reveals truth. And truth, while painful, is liberating. You may not see it now, but you are already stronger than you were before the struggle began. Not because the pain disappeared, but because you carried it and kept going anyway. Strength is not loud. It's quiet endurance. It's waking up and trying again. It's choosing hope even when cynicism feels safer. It's believing that your story isn't finished just because this chapter is difficult. Sometimes the reason only becomes clear when you help someone else through what you once survived. When your pain becomes guidance. When your experience becomes comfort for someone still in the dark. Suddenly, your struggle feels less isolated. Less wasted. Suddenly, the reason isn't about what happened to you, it's about what flows through you now because of it. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all. Meaning doesn't erase pain. It transforms it. It doesn't justify suffering. It redeems it. Everything doesn't happen for a reason because the universe is gentle. It happens because humans are capable of turning even the harshest experiences into wisdom, compassion, and strength. So when life feels unfair, when answers feel delayed, when silence replaces clarity, remember this: you are not behind. You are becoming. The confusion is not the end of the story. It's the soil where understanding grows. And one day, when you look back with a heart that has learned to endure, you won't just see what happened. You'll see who you became because it did. And as you continue forward, you begin to notice something subtle but powerful. The memories that once triggered pain now arrive with understanding. The scars that once felt embarrassing now feel like proof of survival. What once defined you as broken slowly transforms into evidence that you endured. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day you realize you're responding differently. The things that used to shake you no longer have the same power. The questions that once haunted you now feel less urgent. Not because answers suddenly appeared, but because you learned how to live without them. There is a strange kind of wisdom that only comes from being lost. Not the kind of lost that is temporary or dramatic, but the kind where direction dissolves and certainty evaporates. In those moments, identity becomes flexible. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you will become. And that in-between space, though uncomfortable, is where transformation quietly occurs. Growth rarely announces itself. It whispers. It works in the background while you're focused on simply surviving. Many people mistake clarity for confidence. But confidence often arrives before clarity, not after it. Sometimes you have to move forward without understanding, trusting that understanding will catch up later. Every step you take in uncertainty builds inner stability. You become less dependent on guarantees and more capable of navigating ambiguity. And in a world that constantly changes, this ability becomes one of the greatest strengths you can develop. There are moments when the phrase "everything happens for a reason" feels distant, even cruel. Especially when grief is fresh. Especially when wounds are open. Especially when loss feels permanent. In those moments, the phrase is not meant to explain pain. It is meant to remind you that pain is not the final authority. That your life is larger than this moment. That meaning can exist even when comfort does not. Sometimes the reason is simply that you are stronger than you realize, even if you don't feel like it right now. Over time, you begin to recognize patterns. Not the kind that suggest everything was scripted, but the kind that reveal how each experience prepared you for the next. The patience you learned from waiting. The empathy you developed from suffering. The boundaries you formed after being hurt. The courage you discovered when retreat was no longer an option. None of these qualities appeared without cost. But each one expanded your capacity to live more fully. There's an important realization that comes with maturity. Life does not owe us explanations. It offers experiences. And while explanations can comfort us, experiences shape us. You may never fully understand why certain doors closed or why certain people left. But you can understand what those moments taught you. And often, that lesson is far more valuable than the answer you were seeking. What we often call bad timing is sometimes life rearranging priorities. What we label as failure is sometimes life asking for refinement. And what we experience as loss is sometimes life making space. Space for growth. Space for truth. Space for a version of yourself that couldn't exist before. The reason may not justify the pain, but it can give it direction. As time passes, the weight you once carried begins to feel lighter. Not because it vanished, but because you grew stronger. Perspective expands. What once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. What once felt permanent now feels temporary. You begin to understand that endurance itself is a form of wisdom. That staying present through discomfort is an act of courage. That choosing hope again and again, even when disappointment feels inevitable, is a quiet rebellion against despair. Eventually, you realize that the reason is rarely about the event itself. It's about the internal shift it creates. The way it reshapes values. The way it redefines success. The way it teaches discernment. The way it deepens gratitude. You begin to appreciate small moments more fully. Silence becomes less threatening. Simplicity becomes more meaningful. You stop chasing every opportunity and start honoring what aligns with your inner truth. And then something unexpected happens. You become a source of calm for others. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've learned how to sit with uncertainty. You listen without fixing. You understand without judging. Your presence becomes reassuring because you embody the knowledge that storms can be survived. That life can break you and still leave you standing. The phrase "everything happens for a reason" no longer feels like a cliché. It feels like a reflection of resilience. A reminder that even when life feels random, your response is intentional. That even when circumstances are uncontrollable, growth is not. That meaning is not something you wait for, it's something you build, moment by moment, choice by choice. So if you're still waiting for the reason, let this be your permission to stop rushing the answer. Let yourself live the question. Let experience shape insight. Let time reveal what force never could. Because one day, often when you least expect it, the reason will surface, not as an explanation, but as understanding. And in that moment, you won't need proof. You'll simply know. There comes a point when you stop arguing with reality. Not because you gave up, but because you finally understood that resistance was exhausting you more than the pain itself. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. It means you recognize that fighting the past only keeps you trapped inside it. And once you loosen that grip, even slightly, something shifts inside you. Energy that was once spent on anger, regret, or denial slowly becomes available for healing. This is where many people misunderstand growth. They think growth feels like motivation, clarity, or confidence. But real growth often feels like quiet surrender. It feels like choosing peace over being right. It feels like releasing the need to control outcomes. It feels like trusting yourself to handle whatever comes next, even if you don't know what that is yet. And that trust, slowly built through hardship, becomes one of the strongest foundations you'll ever stand on. You begin to notice that life keeps testing the lessons you claim to have learned. Not to punish you, but to confirm your readiness. The same patterns return in different forms. Similar challenges appear with new faces. And each time, you're given a choice. React the old way, or respond with what you've learned. This is how you know growth is real. Not when life gets easier, but when you get wiser. There is a quiet courage in continuing without guarantees. In waking up and choosing effort even when enthusiasm is absent. In showing kindness when bitterness would be easier. In staying open when closing off would feel safer. These moments don't look heroic from the outside. No one applauds them. But they shape the inner architecture of your character. And over time, that inner strength changes the way you experience the world. At some point, you realize that waiting for life to make sense before living fully is a mistake. Meaning is not a prerequisite for joy. You don't need to understand everything to appreciate moments of peace, laughter, or connection. You can hold grief and gratitude at the same time. You can carry uncertainty and still move forward. Life is not an exam you pass by having all the answers. It's an experience you deepen by staying present. The stories we tell ourselves about our past matter. When you frame your life only through the lens of what went wrong, you reinforce pain. But when you begin to notice what you survived, what you adapted to, and what you learned, your narrative changes. You stop seeing yourself as unlucky or broken. You start seeing yourself as resilient, as evolving, as capable. And this shift in perspective quietly alters your future choices. There is also a humbling realization that arrives with time. Some reasons are not personal. Not every hardship is a reflection of your worth. Not every failure is a verdict on your ability. Sometimes life intersects with circumstances beyond your control. Other people's choices, timing, systems, chance. Understanding this frees you from unnecessary self-blame. It allows compassion to replace criticism. It allows healing to begin where judgment once lived. And still, even within things you couldn't control, you controlled something vital. Your response. Your endurance. Your willingness to keep trying. Your ability to adapt. These qualities don't show up on resumes or social media, but they define the quality of your life far more than visible achievements ever will. They are the unseen reasons behind future stability, deeper relationships, and lasting fulfillment. As the years pass, you stop needing life to justify itself to you. You trust your ability to extract meaning regardless of circumstances. You understand that reasons don't always arrive as explanations. Sometimes they arrive as redirection. Sometimes as wisdom. Sometimes as peace. Sometimes as the quiet confidence that no matter what happens next, you will find your way through it. And when someone else sits across from you, overwhelmed, searching for answers you don't have, you don't offer cliches. You offer presence. You offer understanding. You offer the silent reassurance that confusion is survivable. That clarity is patient. That pain does not erase potential. In that moment, your journey becomes someone else's hope. And suddenly, your struggle carries a meaning that goes beyond you. This is when the phrase finally settles into something real. Not a slogan. Not a defense against pain. But a recognition that life, in all its unpredictability, shaped you into someone capable of depth. Capable of empathy. Capable of strength that doesn't need to prove itself. Everything didn't happen to test you. It happened, and you rose to meet it. So if you are still in the middle of it, still searching, still questioning, still hurting, let this be enough for now. You are not late. You are not failing. You are not missing the point. You are living it. And one day, perhaps quietly, perhaps unexpectedly, you will look back and realize that the reason you were searching so hard was because you were becoming someone who could finally understand. As life moves forward, you begin to sense that urgency itself was part of the struggle. The rush to fix everything. The pressure to figure it all out. The constant inner voice demanding progress, clarity, closure. Over time, that voice grows quieter. Not because problems disappear, but because you stop letting impatience dictate your peace. You learn that healing cannot be rushed without being distorted. That understanding arrives when it's ready, not when it's demanded. You also start to see how much of your suffering came from expectations rather than reality. Expectations of how people should behave. Of how timelines should unfold. Of how life should reward effort. When reality didn't cooperate, disappointment followed. But with maturity comes flexibility. You begin to adjust expectations instead of resenting reality. And in doing so, you reclaim power that was once given away to outcomes you could never control. There's a strange freedom in admitting you don't know. In releasing the illusion that certainty equals safety. The more honest you become with yourself, the lighter you feel. You stop pretending that unanswered questions are failures. You recognize them as invitations to grow deeper rather than wider. To build substance instead of image. To become grounded rather than impressive. At some point, you notice that your definition of success has changed. It's no longer just about achievement, status, or recognition. It's about alignment. About inner peace. About waking up without dread and going to sleep without regret. About being able to sit alone with your thoughts without needing distraction. These shifts don't make headlines, but they transform lives quietly and permanently. You also begin to appreciate timing in a new way. What once felt delayed now feels deliberate. What once felt mistimed now feels merciful. You realize that had certain things worked out sooner, you might not have been ready to handle them. That arriving later sometimes means arriving wiser. And that missing certain opportunities saved you from paths that looked appealing but would have drained you over time. Life's unpredictability no longer feels like a threat. It feels like space. Space for reinvention. Space for growth. Space for surprises you couldn't have planned but needed nonetheless. You stop demanding guarantees and start cultivating adaptability. And adaptability, more than control, becomes your greatest advantage. There is also a gentler relationship with the past that develops. You stop replaying old moments with the intent to punish yourself. You revisit them with curiosity instead. What was I learning then? What was I protecting? What did that version of me need that I didn't know how to give? This compassion toward your former self becomes a form of healing you didn't know you needed. And in extending that compassion inward, you naturally extend it outward. You become less reactive, less judgmental, more patient. You understand that everyone is navigating unseen battles. That people speak from wounds as much as from wisdom. That harshness often masks fear. And this understanding softens you, not into weakness, but into strength that doesn't need to dominate to feel secure. Eventually, you recognize that meaning is not something you discover once and carry forever. It evolves as you evolve. What made sense at one stage of life may no longer apply at another. And that's not failure. That's growth. You're allowed to outgrow narratives. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to redefine what the reason looks like as you gain new perspective. You stop waiting for life to validate you. You validate yourself through presence, effort, and integrity. You stop measuring progress through external milestones and start noticing internal shifts. How you recover faster. How you set boundaries sooner. How you choose differently without guilt. These are the quiet victories that signal real transformation. And perhaps the most profound realization of all emerges slowly. The reason was never meant to comfort you immediately. It was meant to mature you gradually. To shape your character rather than explain your circumstances. To teach you how to stand even when the ground beneath you felt unstable. To show you that resilience is not loud, but steady. So if today still feels uncertain, if tomorrow feels undefined, let that be okay. Let the unfolding continue without forcing conclusions. Trust that understanding will arrive in layers, not all at once. And when it does, it won't announce itself dramatically. It will feel natural. Earned. Quietly right. You won't say everything happened for a reason because life finally behaved fairly. You'll say it because you learned how to grow meaning from whatever life placed in front of you. And that ability, the ability to transform experience into wisdom, may be the most meaningful reason of all. As this understanding settles in, you notice that fear no longer controls your decisions the way it once did. It still exists, but it no longer sits in the driver's seat. You've learned that fear often appears when something meaningful is at stake, not because danger is guaranteed, but because growth requires risk. And once you recognize that, fear loses its authority. You stop asking whether you're ready and start asking whether staying the same is costing you more than trying something new. You begin to trust your intuition in ways you never did before. Not because it's always right, but because it's informed by experience. By moments of trial. By mistakes that taught discernment. By lessons earned the hard way. This inner voice grows clearer as external noise fades. And slowly, you realize that many of the answers you were searching for were never outside of you. They were forming inside you the entire time. There's also a growing awareness that life doesn't move in straight lines. Progress loops, pauses, detours, and sometimes retreats. But none of that negates movement. Even moments that look like setbacks often refine direction. You stop labeling your journey as behind or ahead and start seeing it as uniquely timed. Comparison loses its grip. Someone else's chapter no longer invalidates your own. With this shift comes patience. Not passive waiting, but active endurance. The kind that keeps you grounded during uncertainty. The kind that allows discomfort without panic. You learn that urgency is often fueled by fear, while patience is fueled by trust. And trust, once cultivated, changes the entire texture of your life. You begin to realize how much of your earlier suffering came from trying to be understood rather than trying to understand yourself. Wanting validation. Wanting reassurance. Wanting someone else to confirm that your pain mattered. Over time, you become that witness for yourself. You honor your experiences without needing them to be justified by others. And that self-recognition brings a peace that external approval never could. At some point, the question shifts. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin to ask, "What does this ask of me now?" The focus moves from explanation to response. From helplessness to agency. From victimhood to responsibility. Not in a harsh way, but in an empowering one. You realize that even when you couldn't choose what happened, you can always choose how it shapes you. You also become aware that not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things are meant to be released. Some chapters are meant to end without resolution. Closure, you learn, is something you give yourself, not something others owe you. And once you stop chasing unfinished explanations, emotional space opens up for peace to enter. Your relationship with time changes as well. You stop seeing it as an enemy racing against you and start seeing it as an ally shaping you. You understand that becoming takes time, and that rushing the process only delays its depth. The slow build of character, wisdom, and self-awareness creates foundations that quick success never could. And then there's gratitude. Not the forced kind that ignores pain, but the honest kind that coexists with it. Gratitude for strength discovered, for clarity earned, for resilience built, for lessons that softened you rather than hardened you. This gratitude doesn't deny suffering. It redeems it. You begin to notice joy returning in subtle ways. Not loud excitement, but quiet contentment. A sense of steadiness. The ability to appreciate moments without fearing their loss. Joy becomes less about circumstance and more about presence. And presence, you realize, has been the lesson all along. Eventually, you reach a place where the phrase "everything happens for a reason" no longer demands belief. It reflects experience. It's no longer something you say to survive pain. It's something you understand because you've lived through transformation. You don't claim that everything was necessary. You acknowledge that nothing was meaningless. And in that understanding, you find peace. Not because life finally made sense, but because you did. And before you leave this moment, take a breath and let this thought settle gently in your heart. If you're still searching for meaning, still carrying questions, still healing from something life never explained, that doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're growing. Every step you've taken, even the painful ones, has been shaping you into someone deeper, wiser, and more capable of love than you were before. Nothing you've lived through was empty. Nothing you survived was wasted. The reason doesn't always arrive as an answer. Sometimes it arrives as strength, sometimes as peace, and sometimes as the quiet realization that you are still here, still standing, still becoming. If this story resonated with you, if even one line felt like it understood something you couldn't put into words, take a moment to honor that connection. Gently tap the like button, not for the algorithm, but as a reminder to yourself that your journey matters. Share this video with someone who may be silently carrying their own questions, someone who needs to hear that their pain is not pointless and their story is far from over. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, because here, we don't rush answers, we grow into them together. Each video is a space to reflect, to heal, to learn, and to remember that even in uncertainty, there is meaning waiting to be discovered. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart, and for allowing these words to walk beside you for a moment. Until the next time, keep trusting your journey, keep learning from every chapter, and keep believing that even when life feels unclear, you are exactly where you need to be. And if you're still here, still listening, let this be the softest reminder of all: you didn't find this video by accident. Something in you was searching, even if you couldn't name it. Maybe you came here tired of pretending you're fine. Maybe you needed reassurance without judgment. Maybe you just needed to feel less alone in your thoughts. Whatever brought you here, let it be enough for tonight. Remember this: your life is not measured by how quickly you heal, how perfectly you understand things, or how smoothly your journey looks from the outside. It is measured by how honestly you live, how deeply you feel, and how bravely you keep going even when the reason isn't clear yet. Growth is not loud. Healing is not linear. And becoming takes time. Be gentle with yourself while it happens. If these words gave you even a moment of peace, press like as a quiet promise to yourself, a promise to keep choosing hope over numbness, curiosity over fear, and patience over self-criticism. Share this video with someone you care about, not because they're broken, but because they're human. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can offer someone is the reminder that their struggle makes sense. And subscribe to this channel if you want more moments like this, moments that don't rush you, don't lecture you, don't demand certainty, but simply walk with you through the questions that shape us all. This isn't just a channel. It's a space for reflection, for growth, for learning how to trust life even when it feels unclear. Wherever you are in your journey, know this: the chapter you're in right now is not a mistake. It's not a delay. It's not a dead end. It's preparation. And one day, when you look back with kinder eyes and a stronger heart, you'll understand why you needed to pass through this moment to become who you're meant to be. Until we meet again, keep listening to your inner voice, keep learning from every experience, and keep believing that even in the silence, life is shaping something meaningful within you. You're not behind. You're on your way. And as this moment slowly fades, carry this with you: you are not required to have everything figured out to move forward. You are allowed to pause, to breathe, to take life one honest step at a time. The pressure to become someone overnight was never meant for a human heart. Becoming is gentle. Becoming is slow. Becoming is sacred. And every question you're carrying right now is proof that you're still engaged with life, still curious, still open, and that matters more than certainty ever will. If this video felt like a conversation you needed, if it felt like someone finally spoke to the thoughts you keep quiet, let that connection mean something. Stay with this channel. Not because it promises answers, but because it promises honesty. Because here, we don't pretend life is simple, we explore why it's meaningful anyway. Each time you return, you're not just watching a video, you're choosing reflection over noise, depth over distraction, understanding over rush. Like this video as a small act of gratitude to yourself for staying open. Share it with someone who may not know how to ask for help but would recognize it in these words. And subscribe so we can keep walking through these thoughts together, one story, one reflection, one quiet realization at a time. And when you close this video and return to your world, remember this above all else: you are not broken because you struggle, you are not weak because you question, and you are not lost because you don't yet see the full picture. You are human. You are learning. You are becoming. Life doesn't rush its masterpieces. And neither should you.